What's up, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of JT Sports Live. I'm your host, JT. My apologies for the 45-minute delay. Yeah, we try to be punctual most of the times, but when you're doing this by yourself, you got to come up with all your talking points, create all the graphics. Sometimes it takes a little bit longer than what your brother may like to put together a live show. But hey, man, at least we're live on this wonderful Tuesday afternoon. I don't know if any of you guys caught any of the madness from March Madness, pun intended. Your boy had a little bit of some dough on UConn, and Darren Hurley, or the raging Money Boy Hurleys, came through in the clutch for your boy. And while we're talking about coming up clutch, man, the Cowboys and the Chiefs, they need to clutch up in the NFL draft. That's only less than a month away from now, because with what they've done in free agency so far, it's not going to be enough for them to improve on the defensive side of the ball. They're going to need to knock it out of the park in the draft, which has caused a little bit of panic among the Cowboys and Chiefs. Can they really get it right in the draft? Can they go and hit on 4 or 5 guys, hit on their first round picks, hit on a few day 2, day 3 guys? What are the crucial draft needs for every team in the AFC North? We're going to be breaking that down. I'm going to be responding to some backlash that I've been getting from you guys when it comes to my take on Drake Maye being an elite quarterback. We'll dive into the state of the San Francisco 49ers, which is very frustrating. And then I saved the best for last. What took me so long to come on here is that I spent 5-6 hours today coming up with the most overhyped draft prospects from the 2010s. I cannot wait to reveal this list. If you live, eat, breathe, and die football, congratulations, you have come to the right place. We're talking all things football, NFL, college football, NFL draft, 24/7, 365 days throughout the year. If you're a football junkie, smash that like button, subscribe to the channel, turn on post notifications so you do not miss when we drop new content. Remember, we are not just a YouTube channel. We are a podcast. You can find this episode along with all of our previous ones in audio format, wherever you get your podcast from, Apple, Spotify. The links are down in the description below. Shout out to the person who just gave us our 82nd 5-star review on Apple. Can't appreciate you enough, my dude. Make sure that you guys keep on rating the pod 5 stars. Apple, Spotify. The links are in the description below. And let's dive into it. The NFL draft is only a few weeks away, and we got to discuss what every team in the AFC North's crucial needs are with the draft just 4 weeks away. Starting with the Pittsburgh Steelers, their biggest need right now is an offensive guard. They lost one of their starters in Isaac Seumalo in free agency to the Arizona Cardinals. Spencer Anderson is a young, ascending player. He could end up starting in replace of Isaac Seumalo, but drafting some competition, round 2, round 3 at offensive guard won't hurt. The Steelers also need a slot receiver that can get some yak and can add a little bit more depth to the receiving room. You already got Michael Pittman and DK Metcalf, one of the more underrated wide receiver duos in the league, 2 of the more physical wideouts in the NFL. All you need now is a small electric slot receiver that can do a little bit of dirty work underneath. I like Zachariah Branch a lot. He's a wide receiver out of Georgia. He would be a perfect pickup for the Steelers. Isn't that good when it comes to running routes. He's not your prototypical, I'm going to throw the football downfield, he's going to go grab it, 50-50 ball kind of receiver that the Steelers seem to like. But Zachariah Branch will bring some after the catch explosiveness that the Steelers didn't really have that much last season and haven't really had in the last few years, if we're being honest, since Antonio Brown and Juju Smith-Schuster. And then they need a slot corner. You already have JPJ, Jamal Dean. You just got to shore up your slot corner position, and you're all set. For the Baltimore Ravens, they need to find Tyler Linderbaum's replacement. This is one of the deeper drafts that we've had in the last few years. At center, you get a guy like a Jake Slaughter or a Parker Brailsford in round 4, maybe round 5. Offensive guard, you already needed one with how bad Daniel Philemon-Young was last year, but you also need another offensive guard as well. You signed John Simpson in free agency. Don't know if he played good enough last season to warrant automatically assuming he's going to be one of the starting offensive guards for the Ravens. They are picking 14th in the draft. They're going to have the opportunity to pick from any of the best offensive guards available with that pick. They also need a tag team partner on the opposite side on defense of Trey Hendrickson. They drafted Mike Green last season. He had some few moments of brilliance here and there, but don't know how much Jesse Mentor's willing to bet on Mike Green taking a huge year 2 leap since he didn't draft him at all. But this edge class isn't that deep. Outside of the top 3 edge rushers, Ruben Bain, Arvell Reese, David Bailey, once you get past those guys, it's pretty slim pickings from there. So if the Ravens are going to take an edge, they more than likely are going to have to trade up if they want to walk away with one of the premium ones this year. The Cincinnati Bengals, they don't really have too many holes, if any at all, on offense. Their offensive line could use some beefing up, but they have too many holes on defense to ignore. The Bengals just need to use all their draft picks this year strictly on defense, because you have holes at every single level of this defense. You had the worst pass rush in the NFL last season. How did you improve that in free agency? You signed Boye Mafe, who had 9 sacks 3 seasons ago. In his last 2 seasons, he has regressed. You got Miles Murphy, who has kind of reached his peak as a Cincinnati Bengal. He had a career high 5.5 sacks last year. That obviously tells you the Bengals need a lot of help at rushing the quarterback. You also need a defensive tackle. You got Jonathan Allen in free agency, who's going to be pretty solid, but he's not getting any younger. You're going to need to find the next Geno Atkins. Geno Atkins, one of the most underrated players in the history of the NFL, deserves to be a Hall of Famer. If you're a diehard Bengals fan, you know how much of a monster Geno Atkins was. When you have a dominant pass rushing defensive tackle in the middle of your defensive line, it changes how offensives have to game plan for your defense. Guys that are very good rushing the passer from the interior of the defensive line come a dime a dozen. Maybe you end up trading down from the 10th overall pick if you can't land one of the premier defensive players, whether that be a Sonny Styles, a Caleb Downs, and maybe you look to trade down and you settle on the Caleb Banks. That would be a phenomenal pickup. You also need 2 starting linebackers. Now, I know that Demetrius Knight, Barrett Carter got a lot of playing time for you last season. They're very young, and there's a lot of optimism that they can improve this season. When your run defense, though, was as bad as what the Bengals' run defense was with these 2 guys in, along with their inability to cover, sure, you can be optimistic about them developing in year 2, taking that leap, but you shouldn't give them anything guaranteed with how bad they were last year. You definitely could look to add some more competition for those 2 starting linebacker spots. This is a very deep class. If you need an off-ball linebacker, I think Jacob Rodriguez, linebacker from Texas Tech, will be a phenomenal draft pick for the Bengals if he's there around round 3, round 4. I think he's going to be underdrafted since he's not the most athletic linebacker in the world, but he has very good instincts. He's a very good tackler, and he's pretty solid in coverage also. He's better than Demetrius Knight and Barrett Carter, in my opinion. And lastly, we have the Cleveland Browns. they've invested a lot of money into their offensive line and free agency. They still need an offensive tackle. They have DeJuan Jones, who has very good size, a lot of potential, but he's coming off his third straight season-ending injury. They need a true number one wide receiver. You got Cedric Tillman, who I think is okay. Jerry Jeudy has butterfingers for hands. You got Isaiah Bond, who could have a breakout season this year. Look out for him. If you get a Cornell Tate, a Mekhi Lemon, or hell, even a Jordan Tyson in the first round, you're balling if you're the Browns. And then they need to find a brother in destruction to put alongside of Myles Garrett. He's been doing it by himself for the last few years for the Browns. They've tried to find another additional partner to team him up with, but they just haven't had that much luck. This year, in round 2, round 3, you don't have a lot of high ceiling edge rushers, but you do have guys who could be solid rotational pieces. They give you 6-7 sacks per season. R. Mason Thomas is a guy the Browns could look to target in day 2. Romello Hyde, he could be in the cards for the Browns also in day 2 of the draft. But these are the 3 crucial draft needs for every team in the AFC North, with the 2026 NFL draft just around the corner. Shout out to everybody that's tuned in. Shout out to my guy M Sparks. He says, "What's good, JT? Pittsburgh Steelers for life." He says, "We already have our slot receiver, JT. Roman Wilson will step up." Man, listen, I was high on Roman Wilson last year. He had the opportunity to step up, and he didn't really do too much with it. We had to sign guys like Adam Thielen off the street. I thought Roman Wilson was going to break out last year, but he just couldn't really find his footing with Aaron Rodgers. Anytime they did go to him, he didn't really make too many plays. I think he did have a crucial drop as well. I'm still rooting for him. I was high on him. I thought he was going to be pretty good coming out of Michigan. He's a solid route runner, pretty good after the catch as well, has very good acceleration. But they definitely could look to add another receiver. Jeremy Bernard, Zachariah Branch would be some very good additions. And Roman Wilson, if he is as good as what me and M Sparks believe he has the ability to be, then he should be able to beat out whoever the Steelers draft. But they definitely do have to add another receiver. Either that be another outside receiver or another slot receiver, because they do kind of lack some depth in the receiver room. I got a lot of backlash from NFL fans on TikTok and Instagram over me being honest about how good Drake Maye is right now. Drake Maye is an elite quarterback. I don't need to see more than one season out of Drake Maye to be confident that he's one of the best quarterbacks in the NFL. Last year, Drake Maye carried the Patriots to the Super Bowl with the average roster. He had a garbage offensive line. We all saw Will Campbell out there getting ate up for breakfast at left tackle. And then you had old man Stephon Diggs as Drake Maye's best receiver at 32 years old, coming off an ACL injury last season. Then you had a defense that was elite. But there were times when the defense in big games, like when they went up against the Buffalo Bills, they couldn't really get a stop, and Drake Maye had to put that cape on, and he had to put the team on his back. Drake Maye had a superb season, given the talent that he had surrounding him. If you put Jalen Hurts on last year's Patriots team, not only do they not make it to the playoffs, but they probably end up only winning 7-8 games. You put Drake Maye on last year's Eagles team, and they're easily right back in the Super Bowl. Drake Maye has already done more with less than what guys like Justin Herbert, Trevor Lawrence, and Brock Purdy have done. And these are all quarterbacks who are presumed to be better than Drake Maye. Hell, I had some people saying that Bo Nix is better than Drake Maye. In what universe is Bo Nix a better quarterback than Drake Maye? Bo Nix was solid last year, but he was very inconsistent. Drake Maye was consistent from week 1 to the final game of the season that the Patriots played. The Patriots losing to the Seahawks in the Super Bowl was not Drake Maye's fault. His offensive line had him out there seeing ghosts. And when your best receiver is a 30-something-year-old Stephon Diggs, yeah, you're not going to have that much success when you're going up against one of the best defenses that the NFL has seen in over the last decade. But even though Drake Maye didn't have a good outing in the Super Bowl, he still played good enough to put them in position to even have a shot at winning that thing. Drake Maye was the first quarterback in NFL history to get 3 playoff runs against 3 elite defenses. The Chargers, who they played in the wild card round, had a top 10 defense. The Broncos in the AFC Championship, they had a top 10 defense. The Broncos, not just were they the only team that the Patriots played in the playoffs that had an elite defense, but also the Houston Texans, who some may argue either had the best or the second best defense in the league behind the Seattle Seahawks. I don't care if Drake Maye had an easy schedule and that's why he was able to put up all these godly numbers. The Patriots had an easy schedule in Drake Maye's rookie season, and they could even beat the teams that were just as bad, if not worse than them. So I don't care if the Patriots had an easy schedule, and that's why Drake Maye was able to put up these MVP numbers. You can't make it to the Super Bowl if you are a below average quarterback in today's NFL. The way that some folks out here talk about Drake Maye, they make it seem like this dude was only good because he was going up against jabronis, when in the playoffs, he went up against 3 elite defenses and very bad weather conditions, I may add. In that wild card round game against the Chargers, that weather was ugly. Against the Houston Texans in the divisional round, that weather was ugly. And then the AFC Championship, Drake Maye got the Patriots the dub in the freaking blizzard in the second half. If Drake Maye isn't an elite quarterback, then nobody in the NFL right now is an elite quarterback. Because any quarterback that does more with less, like what Drake Maye did last season, deserves to be called an elite quarterback, because that's what an elite quarterback does. You hear so often all these excuses made for Justin Herbert. Oh, Justin Herbert doesn't have this. Justin Herbert doesn't have that. Oh, Justin Herbert needs this. Brock Purdy doesn't have that. Brock Purdy needs this. You didn't have any of those excuses coming from Drake Maye's camp. Drake Maye didn't say, yeah, I can't get to the Super Bowl because my offensive line is trash. I got Will Campbell protecting my blind side. I got Stephon Diggs, that's my wide receiver 1. Drake Maye, in spite of having an average supporting cast around him, still was able to get the Patriots to the Super Bowl. There are other quarterbacks that have more talent around them that do far less in the playoffs than what Drake Maye just did. It was his first time in the playoffs and only his second season in the league. And he takes the Patriots to a place that they haven't been since the GOAT was last there in Foxborough. And also, by the way, let's not forget that, let's not act like the Patriots were viewed as a Super Bowl juggernaut coming into the start of last season. If anything, the Patriots severely overachieved. They severely exceeded expectations. You thought that at best the Patriots were going to be a 10, 11 win team. Maybe they win a playoff game, but you didn't see them going no further than the divisional round. So for them to win the AFC Championship and make it to the Super Bowl is a testament to how good of a quarterback Drake Maye is. Drake Maye is elite. He carried the Patriots all last season with an average roster, a garbage offensive line, old man Stephon Diggs as his best receiver, and somehow still finished number 1 in QBR, 3rd in passing touchdowns. Meanwhile, you have other quarterbacks in better situations that did less despite having more than what Drake Maye did, having to do more, having to put on that cape with a team that wasn't even expected to be no better than a one-and-done playoff team at best. Drake Maye is an elite quarterback. Don't tell me that Justin Herbert is an elite quarterback when he has no playoff wins. He saves his worst football for the playoffs, but Drake Maye is an elite quarterback, though, even though he just took the Patriots to the Super Bowl with an average roster in his first full-time season as the starter. In only 2 seasons, Drake Maye has already surpassed Justin Herbert as a quarterback. You keep saying Justin Herbert is elite. He's only getting held back because he does have a good offensive line. Drake Maye's offensive line was dog water. He had Will Campbell started for him at left tackle in the Super Bowl. We all saw what the Seahawks defense did to Will Campbell in that game. They were having an all-you-can-eat buffet on Will Campbell. Any defensive lineman that was matched up against Will Campbell, they were licking their chops because they knew they were going to have an easy shot at getting Drake Maye on the ground. If Justin Herbert is an elite quarterback, then so is Drake Maye. Drake Maye has done far more with less than what Justin Herbert has had. And yet, Justin Herbert plays awful in the playoffs. Drake Maye played good enough for his team to get to the Super Bowl in only his first appearance in the postseason. It shouldn't be a hot take that Drake Maye is an elite quarterback. I don't see what's so outrageous about that statement. The dude finished as the runner-up in MVP voting despite having a team that wasn't really good enough to even be in the Super Bowl, if we're being honest. When you think about the teams that make it to the Super Bowl, the Patriots this year don't really fit that description. They more so got to the Super Bowl, not because they were a super talented team, but because they were a well-coached team, a fundamentally sound football team that had a top 5 quarterback in the league last season. Drake Maye is an elite quarterback, and I will live and die on this hill. So we do something called the State of the Franchise, where we break down the state of every team in the NFL in the current moment. And right now, the 49ers are in a very frustrating state, since for the last 7 years, the 49ers have been Super Bowl contenders. They've been right there. And somehow, some way, the Rams and the Seahawks have Super Bowl rings before Kyle Shanahan has one, even though the 49ers kind of had a head start over both the Seahawks and the Rams. But all of a sudden, these past 2 years have happened, and the 49ers go from running the AFC West or running the NFC West to now being stuck in 3rd place in this division. And look, injuries and lack of star power hurt the 49ers last season. Obviously, if this team was at full strength going into the postseason, things would have went way differently than what they did. But even if the 49ers were at full strength, they still wouldn't have been good enough to beat Seattle because they just don't have enough firepower on offense. And same thing goes for the defense. The difference between the 49ers and the Rams and the Seahawks is that the Seahawks and the Rams draft much better than what the 49ers do, which is why both of those teams have much better rosters than them, since they're younger. They have high-level players still in their prime on rookie deals, which gives them a lot of flexibility when it comes to salary cap and cap space. You got the 49ers on the other hand, though, who are the oldest team in the NFL. They have the oldest roster in the league, and then they double down on that by signing Mike Evans in free agency, bringing back Dre Greenlaw, trading for Cowboys defensive lineman Oza Odigizua. And look, the 49ers are a better team than what they were last year, but you still are a team that has a history of being unable to stay healthy, and some of that can be attributed to the age that the 49ers have. The majority of their best players are either nearing their 30s or in their 30s. So it's no surprise that the 49ers have been unable to stay healthy with them having such an old roster. And then you bring in all these older veteran guys in free agency. Mike Evans just missed a bulk of last season due to an injury. So I don't know if he's going to be able to stay around, how long he's going to be available for you. Dre Greenlaw, he's fragile luggage. You breathe on him, the brother gets injured. So how healthy is he going to be for you this upcoming season? The 49ers are kind of banking on luck being on their side this year for them being able to make another Super Bowl run. Because you can never trust the 49ers to be near full strength come playoff time. No team is 100% come the postseason. But the 49ers, by the time you get to week 9, week 10, they're already down 7 starters on both sides of the football, damn near it seems like. What's so irritating about where the 49ers are right now as a franchise is that they're good enough to win a Super Bowl, but they won't be good enough to beat the Rams or the Seahawks in the playoffs when it truly matters. The Seahawks and the Rams have high-end talent at damn near every position. The 49ers, they have solid players at every position, but they don't have the best of the best everywhere. You got Fred Warner, you got Nick Bosa, but you don't got one of the best corners in the league like how the Rams and the Seahawks do. You don't have one of the better offensive lines in the league like how the Rams and the Seahawks do. You don't have a quarterback as good as Matthew Stafford, who just won MVP. Brock Purdy is a phenomenal quarterback, but he's not on the level of a Matthew Stafford or even a Sam Darnold. I would argue and say that Sam Darnold has already surpassed Brock Purdy as a starting quarterback in this league. The 49ers, adding Mike Evans makes them better on offense, but it doesn't entirely move the needle and make them a lock to win the NFC West or to make a deep playoff run this upcoming season, since the Rams and the 49ers already had loaded receiver rooms. Even with you having Mike Evans, you still don't have a better receiver room than what the Rams and the Seahawks do. George Kittle, sure, he makes your passing room a lot more respectable with what you have to work with as your pass catchers go. But from top to bottom, the 49ers don't have the high-end talent nor the depth that their contemporaries, their biggest rivals in the NFC West do, and the Rams and the Seahawks. They drive so well, and they make so many good trades that for the way that the 49ers like to operate, they're not as aggressive as what the Rams and the Seahawks are, and that's hurting them. And they also lost Robert Saleh. You were waiting for so many years to finally have the opportunity to bring him back as your defensive coordinator, and then the long year you have him back, the majority of your starters go down with injuries. And you lose Raheem Morris, and you're replacing him with, you lose Robert Saleh, and you're replacing him with Raheem Morris, who is a downgrade. Raheem Morris is a solid defensive coordinator, but he's more close to what Steve Wilkes was for you than he is Robert Saleh. Now, he won a Super Bowl with the Rams, and his defense was solid during that Super Bowl run. He had a top 15 defense that year, but he's not as innovative, nor is he as good as what Robert Saleh was at getting more out of what you had on the field last year on the defensive side of the ball. With all those injuries, you had pretty much practice squad players playing on that defense, and Robert Saleh still had those boys playing at an elite level. The 49ers are stuck in the shadows of the Rams and the Seahawks. Despite them being Super Bowl contenders for the past 7 years, having a head start of winning a Super Bowl compared to the Rams and the Seahawks, those two franchises have already surpassed you in a lot less time. And now you're stuck in third place with a roster that is good enough to make you believe that you can win a Super Bowl, but it's not actually good enough when it matters the most in the playoffs. I don't see the 49ers being a Super Bowl contender this year. I think they'll be in the divisional round, but I don't see them getting past either the Rams or the 49ers if that's one of the two teams they got to go through to get to the NFC Championship. My way too early NFC Championship prediction right now is the Rams versus the Seahawks Part 2. These are the two best teams in the NFC by a very large margin. They got two young rosters. They got two phenomenal coaches, great quarterback play, and they got a lot of high-end talent, but also a lot of depth as well. The 49ers don't have the high-end talent that the Rams and the Seahawks do. They have a solid roster, but they don't have elite players scattered all throughout their team at every position like how the Rams and the Seahawks do. The 49ers are just stuck in third place in the NFC West, and they're just stuck being good enough to get you to believe, to get you to buy into the hype, but never good enough when it actually counts. There is no team under more pressure entering the 2026 NFL Draft than the Kansas City Chiefs. They lost several starters on the defensive side of the football and free agency, and they have a bunch of holes at every position on defense. They need to improve their pass rush, which outside of Chris Jones, they don't have a dominant one-on-one pass rusher. They need help at linebacker, and they need a lot of assistance in the secondary with them losing a bunch of guys on the back end. Now, the good thing for Kansas City is that with the draft being just around the corner, your offense is pretty solid. Your receivers are decent, even though you probably would like to add another one, rather that be in free agency, late before a training camp, or you draft one in the middle portion of the draft. Your offensive line is solid. You just have to invest all of your draft picks on the defensive side of the ball this year if you're Kansas City, because with how bad your defense is right now, it makes you an average team in the loaded AFC. Right now, I think the Chiefs have the 8th most talented roster in the entirety of the AFC conference. They don't have a roster that's good enough to get past the first round of the playoffs at most, since even though you have Steve Spagnuolo, a great coach can only be as good as the players that he has available. And there's only so much you can do when you have a defensive line that just doesn't have any legitimate threat coming off the edge. You don't have a true number one boundary corner. There's a lot of holes that the Chiefs are relying on the draft to be able to fill. And if the Chiefs are going to be able to speed up their rebuild and have an overnight turnaround and be right back in the Super Bowl conversation this year, need to drop Bam Adebayo numbers in the draft this year. Steve Spagnuolo can't elevate a defense with no stars. You can't have an elite defense if you're an elite defensive coordinator, if you don't have any elite defensive players. So what the Chiefs have to do with the 9 picks that they have in the 2026 NFL Draft, they need to make sure at least 4 of those picks they hit on. You have 2 picks in the first round. You're picking 9th overall and 29th overall in the back end of the first. Picking 9th overall guarantees that the Chiefs are going to be in position to walk away with a blue chip defensive prospect out of the draft this year. Now, prospects that I believe could be in play for the Chiefs with the 9th overall selection: Caleb Downs, phenomenal safety out of Ohio State. He's the new modern day star, as that's the new position that's being called. He can play in the slot. He can play single high, 2 high. He can cover tight ends, running backs out of backfield on man coverage. He can even play man against a few slot receivers as well. He's phenomenal against the run. Caleb Downs is one of those kinds of players that you don't overthink it. Even if you don't have a need for Caleb Downs, you still draft him anyway, since his versatility allows him to be a virtual chess piece on your defense. And when you're a defense like Kansas City that is devoid of talent in multiple different areas, you can use a guy like Caleb Downs that can play multiple positions, multiple different spots. It allows you to do a lot of creative things schematically. You go up against Derwin James twice every single season. So you look at how good Derwin James has been throughout his career. That's how I envision Caleb Downs being. Caleb Downs, to me, is Derwin James 2.0. There's a lot of similarities in Caleb Downs' game coming out of college and Derwin James when he was coming out of Florida State nearly a decade ago. Now, if you don't draft Caleb Downs 9th overall, Mesur Delane wouldn't be a bad pick for you 9th overall, even though I believe Caleb Downs has a bigger impact for your defense since he can do so many things, play so many different positions. But Mansour Delane is your prototypical shutdown corner, and every team can use a shutdown corner. The bad thing about trying to get Mansour Delane is there's a strong possibility that the Saints draft him with the pick ahead of you. Now, if you don't draft Caleb Downs or Mansour Delane, and let's say you luck up and one of the best edge rushers are available at 9. Let's say either Ruben Bain, David Bailey, or Arvell Reese are there at 9. You have to draft one of those guys if they're there, because pass rush is a much bigger need than secondary is for Kansas City. This is a pretty deep cornerback class. You can still pass on a guy if you're Kansas City, 9th overall, like a Mansour Delane, and maybe luck up and get a guy like Colton Hood with the 29th overall pick. Or you can get a pretty solid corner in round 2 or round 3. But there aren't a lot of blue chip pass rushers in this draft. Once you get past Ruben Bain, David Bailey, and Arvell Reese, then this class gets a little bit murky. Now, you could get an R. Mason Thomas late in the first round, or you take a guy like Romello Hyde in round 2, round 3. But with the amount of holes that the Chiefs need to fill, you want to try to double up in the first round. You want to try to walk away with a blue chip player on defense with the 9th selection. And then in the back end of the first round, you don't need to get a blue chip kind of player, but you at least need a guy that can start at least 8-9 games for you and have some success as a rookie, wherever that position may be on defense. But if Kansas City is going to get back into Super Bowl contention this year, they're going to have to put up Bam Adebayo numbers in the draft. Brett Veach is going to have one of his best draft classes in over the last 3 years, because he's had a lot of myths in these last few drafts. And this is a draft that Kansas City can't afford to have more misses than hits, since they're already behind the 8 ball. They are the 3rd most talented team in the division, and depending on how well they draft, they could either be still stuck as the 3rd best team in the division, or the Raiders could surpass them from a talent standpoint with how good they've been in free agency and the moves that they've been making and how active they're going to be in the draft. And not to mention, not only is your division tough, but the entire AFC is tough. This is as loaded as what the AFC has been in a very long time. There are like 5, 6, 7 teams that you can make an argument for are good enough to win the Super Bowl this year. So if Kansas City doesn't dominate the draft this year, and they don't walk away with at least 4 guys that can start right away and have big impacts on this team, it's going to be tough sledding for Kansas City. They can find a way to finesse their way into the playoffs, since with Mahomes and Andy Reid still being at their peaks, it's hard to see them missing the playoffs back-to-back seasons. But I could see them going one and done in the playoffs this year if they make it, if they don't get it right in the draft this year. I'm not saying you need to hit on every pick. You got 9 of them. I'm only saying that you need to hit on 4 of them, so you at least need to go 40% in the draft this year. And I don't think that's unrealistic, because that's what it's going to take for Kansas City to catch back up with the Chargers and the Broncos, who are already ahead of them with the money they've had to spend in free agency, the moves that the Broncos have made, acquiring Jalen Waddle in the trade. That definitely has increased the gap a lot further between the Broncos and Kansas City. So Kansas City has a lot of catching up to do. They weren't that active in free agency. They got to be very active, and they got to be right with a lot of their picks in the draft. Kansas City isn't the only team that has to get it right in the draft this year. The Dallas Cowboys have a lot of pressure on them entering the 2026 NFL draft to get it right, with them still having a bunch of problems on defense. Now, last year, the Cowboys missed the playoffs because their defense was worse than the Cincinnati Bengals defense. And that's saying something, because at one point, the Bengals defense was giving up 40 points per game. So if you're giving up more points per game than the Bengals, yeah, you have some serious concerns. And Jerry Jones hasn't really done that much to improve the defense. Now, he's made some moves, but in typical Jerry Jones fashion, he hasn't made big enough moves to really move the needle for the Cowboys defense, going from being one of the worst defenses in the league to even being an average unit this year. You got rid of Matt Eberflus, who you never should have hired to be your defensive coordinator in the first place, and then you replace him with a first-time defensive coordinator in Christian Parker. We've never seen Christian Parker ever call a defense before, so we don't know if he's going to be an upgrade or a downgrade from Matt Eberflus or just as bad. We really don't know. We have nothing to go off when it comes to this dude. You traded for Rashawn Gary. You give up a midday selection to Green Bay to get him. 7.5 sacks in 2025. It looks like you got a good tag team partner, a good running mate on the opposite side of Donovan Azaraku, right? No, because Rashawn Gary, the majority of his 7.5 sacks last year came the first 8 weeks of the season. In the second half, the brother just went MIA. He went missing in action. He had 0 sacks in his last 6 games as a Green Bay Packer. I understand why the Packers were willing to trade him to the Packers. And then you got rid of Aza Odigizua, which, with you having a new defensive coordinator, he didn't fit the scheme. I'm not going to harp on you too much for that, but you are still losing a good player. It's not like Oja Odigizua was trash. Now, you did somewhat improve your secondary a little bit. You signed safety Jalen Thompson to a very fair deal. And I don't think that the Cowboys have as many holes they have to fill on defense as what the Chiefs do. Their defensive line is pretty good. You just need to add another pass rusher to bring in some competition for Rashawn Gary and have a little bit more depth there. Then it allows you to rotate guys around. When your defense was last elite, when you had Dan Quinn as your defensive coordinator, despite you having Michael Parsons, you also had a lot of guys on the bench that were good rotational pass rushers. So the Cowboys need to get a lot of depth at pass rush in this draft, which there's a lot of good situational pass rushers in this class. There's not a lot of high-end pass rushers, but there are a lot of guys that can be Caleb Vaughn chasing. They can give you 6-7 sacks per season, be very good third down pass rushers, situational pass rushers. Where the Cowboys really need some dire help out in the draft is cornerback. You got DeRon Bland, who had a down season last year. You signed Kobe Durant in free agency, he's okay, but he's not really going to be much better than what you had last year. You need to go and get you a Mansour Delane or a Jamal McCoy or Colton Hood, who should be there with the 20th overall pick. And the Cowboys have 2 picks in the first round this year. So they could use both of their first round picks on defense. And this side of the football, you feel a lot better about if you're a Cowboys fan. With the 12th pick, you're going to be in position to land pretty much any of the top cornerbacks outside of Mansour Delane, who probably either goes 8th to the Saints, or he goes 9th to Kansas City, or he probably ends up going to either the Bengals or the Dolphins, because those teams could also use some corner help. But you can still get Avion Terrell, who some may argue is better than Mansour Delane. Some people may say that he's the undisputed cornerback 1 in this class. Or you could double up. Let's say you take Avion Terrell 12th overall, and then you double dip again that corner with the 20th pick, and you get Colton Hood. So the Cowboys could fix 2 of their biggest needs on defense at corner with just their first 2 picks of this draft in the first round. Now, what about linebacker, JT? Because we also need another linebacker to put next to DeMarvion Overshaw. Well, I'm glad you brought that up, because you want to know what would be a lot better if you're a Cowboys fan? Instead of hoping that you can land a premier corner with the 12th pick, you should be crossing your fingers that Sonny Styles falls to the Cowboys 12th overall. If Sonny Styles falls to the Dallas Cowboys at 12, they just got them a bona fide 10-year all-pro level player. And you pair Sonny Styles up with DeMarvion Overshaw, that's going to be a nasty linebacker tandem. Now, what if we can't get Sonny Styles, JT? Because it seems like Sonny Styles is more than likely going to be a top 7 pick or higher. Good thing. Because look, the Dallas Cowboys could double up at linebacker and get another Texas Longhorn to start for them at that position by drafting Anthony Hill with the 20th overall pick. Anthony Hill is one of the most underrated players in this entire draft. He was one of the best players in all of college football his last few years at Texas. If you go back and you watch when Texas played Ohio State in week 1, it was hard not to see Anthony Hill running around, making plays against the run, making big plays against the pass. There is a gap between him and Sonny Styles, but the gap between Sonny Styles and Anthony Hill is a lot smaller than what a lot of y'all may think. Anthony Hill, he has very good instincts, very high football IQ, kind of reminds me of a much more athletic Leighton Vander-esque. And if you're a Cowboys fan, you're definitely familiar with that name. Neck injuries cut his career short, but that's kind of my comp for Anthony Hill. I think he has a lot of Leighton Vander-esque in this game. But the Cowboys going into the draft this year, you have to get it right with your 2 first-round picks, because if you do, you're going to have a much better defense than what you currently have on paper right now. If you can walk away with 2 starting corners in the first round, that's a W. If you can walk away with a starting corner and a starting linebacker, that's also a dub, because you just fill 2 needs. Like, your defensive line is good. You don't need to have the Legion of Boom 2.0. You feel me? You don't need to have the best secondary in the NFL. You don't need to have the Houston Texans secondary to have a good defense if you're Dallas. You already have one of the better defensive lines, one of the better front sevens in the league. All you really just need is a little bit more help on the back end. And with you having 2 first-round picks, with who you're going to have the ability to pick from at corner, possibly linebacker, I don't see how the Cowboys don't have a much better defense walking out of the draft than what they currently do right now, unless they just completely drop the ball and maybe Jeremiah Love falls a little bit. Then, yeah, you probably should just take him since he is the best player available. He'll be much better than any other player you could drive on the defensive side of the ball. But for Dallas, with you kind of just making marginal free agency moves on defense, you got to have a lot of urgency in the draft this year if you truly are trying to get back to the playoffs and you're trying to make another run at possibly giving Jerry Jones what could be his last ever Lombardi trophy. But it's going to have to happen with you dominating the draft. Shout out to everybody that's tuned in. Shout out to Kazir Gordon. Shout out to M Sparks. Shout out to everybody that's tapped in. I'm shocked that all of you guys are up so late in the night, man. What y'all doing up around 11 o'clock at night? Y'all got to be up early in the morning? Hey, I ain't complaining. I'm happy that all you guys are tuned in. Real quick, if you haven't already, smash that like button, subscribe to the channel. Check us out wherever you get your podcast from, Apple, Spotify. You can find this episode along with all of our previous ones in audio format on all podcasting platforms. If you enjoy the content, you want to support the grind, all we ask is that you take 10 seconds out of your busy life to give us a 5-star review. Only takes less than 10 seconds to do. The links are down in the description below. Follow us on Instagram, X, TikTok at JT_Sports_. We post bonus content on there. We like to interact with you guys sometimes when I'm not depressed. I like to respond to a few DMs here and there. So go ahead, give us a follow at JT_Sports_ on Instagram, X, TikTok. Now, I've been waiting all day for this segment, and it's why it took me 45 minutes longer to come on here. But I want to talk about the most overhyped players from the NFL draft, or let me rephrase that. I want to talk about the most overhyped NFL draft prospects from the 2010s. And I'm going off the 2010s since I'm Gen Z. I can't tell you guys about the most overhyped NFL draft prospects of all time, since I've only been on this earth watching football for about 2 decades. So I can't tell you who the overhyped players were in the 90s, early 2000s. I can only go off when I first started watching football, which was the year 2009 till now. So these are going to be the most overhyped draft prospects from 2010 to the year 2026 right now. Starting off with Jadeveon Clowney. Jadeveon Clowney, when he was coming out of South Carolina and he went first overall in the 2014 NFL draft, he was supposed to be what Myles Garrett has been up to this point in his career. He was supposed to be an all-pro level pass rusher. And while Jadeveon Clowney isn't a bust, he definitely is incredibly overhyped based off the expectations he had coming into the league. With that big hit he had in that bowl game, you thought Jadeveon Clowney was going to be a future first ballot Hall of Famer, and all he's really been is a solid above average pass rusher. At best, he can give you 9.5 sacks. He's never had double-digit sacks at any point in his career. He's a 3-time Pro Bowler, so he's not a bust, but he just hasn't lived up to the surreal hype that he had when he went first overall in 2014. He was supposed to be in that Myles Garrett, Michael Parsons, TJ Watt kind of tier of pass rushers, and instead he's just been a C+, B- pass rusher at his best. Tavon Austin is one of the saddest disappointments in NFL history, since the reason why his NFL career ended up being a disappointment, why he didn't live up to the hype, is that he came into the league way too early. He was before his time. If Tavon Austin entered the NFL post-2020 and you put him in a Mike McDaniel or Kyle Shanahan offense, he would have had a much better career. You see, when Tavon Austin got drafted 8th overall in the 2013 draft by the Rams, at that time, the NFL didn't know how to use a guy that had Tavon Austin's skill set. He was one of those guys that was very electric in the open field. He's one of the biggest pre-NIL superstars in college football history. He was a former 2-time All-American. He played wide receiver, running back, kick return, punt return. You pretty much could put Tavon Austin anywhere on your offense. But once he got to the NFL, though, his lack of size started to hurt him, and he just wasn't really that good of a route runner. He kind of struggled to get open by himself. He didn't really create a lot of separation. Despite how explosive he was in the open field, Tavon Austin was one of those kinds of receivers that would benefit more in today's NFL if he came out, since you have much more innovative offensive minds that know how to get a guy like him in space. A guy like Tavon Austin, you were going to have to scheme open. He was a much faster and quicker Deebo Samuel. The way that Kyle Shanahan was able to get the most out of Deebo Samuel, scheme them open, manufacture him touches behind the line of scrimmage, that's how Tavon Austin was going to have a successful career. Unfortunately, in the year 2013, it was more so a big man's game on the perimeter at receiver. You were still looking for your Julio Jones, your Brandon Marshalls. So when you get a guy like Tavon Austin that requires you to have a innovative, ahead of his time offensive coordinator, it's a prime recipe for one of the biggest superstars the pre-NIL era in college football having a disappointing NFL career. Now, Tavon Austin isn't a bust. He played nearly a decade in the league. So if you play a decade in the league, you obviously can play. But when you think of Tavon Austin, you're kind of thinking of your childhood in a sense. Do you remember when you were arguing with your homies at lunch about who was better, Tavon Austin or DeAnthony Thomas? When I think of Tavon Austin, I always replay those highlights, those mixtapes that he used to have, especially the one that went viral when it had that, "You can tell him that I've been from hell and back." You know, for somebody who has such a iconic college football highlight reel, for his NFL career to be what it was, you know, you kind of want Tavon Austin to hop in the time machine, get a little bit younger, and say, run it back one more time. Because if you put Tavon Austin in today's NFL, I feel he would have been much better suited. Kevin White is one of the biggest wide receiver busts in NFL history. He got drafted 7th overall by the Chicago Bears in the 2015 NFL draft. And during this draft, the biggest debate was who was wide receiver one between Kevin White and Amari Cooper. And there were so many people saying that Kevin White has more potential. He has a higher ceiling than Amari Cooper because he's more explosive. He's more dynamic. And then Amari Cooper goes on to be a multi-time Pro Bowl selection, one of the better receivers when he was at his peak. And Kevin White has gone on to be one of the biggest wide receiver busts in NFL history. He lasted 9 seasons in the league and only has 28 career catches, 297 career receiving yards, and no receiving touchdowns at all, and has only played 30 games. Now, he suffered several season-ending injuries during his time with the Bears when he first came into the league, but overall, Kevin White just wasn't as good as what he was hyped up to be, because when he was coming out, he essentially was like Julio Jones 2.0, 6'3", 215 pounds, ran 4.35 in the 40-yard dash, which was a big question about him coming out during the draft process at that time. It was his speed, because on film, he didn't look that fast. So when he ran 4.35 in that 40-yard dash, it all but cemented he was going to be a top 10 pick. And I kind of wonder what would have happened if Kevin White did stay healthy, because when I was legit back then, I was watching Kevin White, I wasn't as good scouting players as what I am now back then, but he was pretty solid. His final season at West Virginia had over 1,400 receiving yards, 10 touchdowns, 109 receptions. I thought Kevin White would have had a solid career. I didn't think he was going to be great, but I thought he would have been much better than being one of the biggest wide receiving busts in NFL history. Oh, man, this is a very sad one. Vernon Hargreaves is one of the most overhyped cornerbacks in NFL history. And it's sad because he was a dog at Florida. He was one of the best cornerbacks in college football during his time at Florida when he first stepped foot on the field as a true freshman. And he went 11th overall in the 2016 NFL draft to the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. And coming out, he was graded as a all-pro level talent by NFL.com. He was very physical despite being undersized. He was like 5'10", but he was very physical, a very good press man-to-man corner. He had no problem coming down, helping out against the run. He kind of was Denzel Ward before Denzel Ward. But unfortunately, he ran a very slow 40-yard dash. He ran like 4.5 something. And you start to have concerns about, was he going to have the speed to keep up with these NFL receivers? And unfortunately, him being undersized, not being that fast, being pretty slow for his frame, along with injuries, is what ultimately led him to only lasting 6 years in the NFL. He had a pretty productive rookie season, but outside of that, he just wasn't that good. And if you go and you watch Vernon Hargreaves' college highlights, you talk about a smacker. For somebody that small, you don't really see somebody laying the wood like that. I'm a little bit shocked no team tried him out at safety, because he could have been a pretty good safety. Very good tackler, pretty good ball skills. It's just he was small, undersized, and very slow. Think of D'Angelo Pons, but running 4.5, 4.6. You probably wouldn't even draft that. Solomon Thomas was supposed to be one of the more dominant interior defensive linemen in the NFL, because when he was coming out of Stanford, he was viewed as one of the top players in the 2017 NFL draft. He was viewed as somebody who had the ceiling of a potential, consistent, all-pro level player. Since his final year at Stanford, he had 15 tackles for loss, 8 sacks. He was a hybrid of a 3-4, 4-3 defensive end. And with his athleticism, he was just able to just dominate everybody that he was matched up against in the Pac-12. Because once he got to the NFL, he just got out-athleted. He didn't have the same ability to get after the quarterback at the next level as what he did at Stanford. But he's been in the league still for nearly a decade because he's been a solid run defender. But why Solomon Thomas was overhyped and why he's been a disappointment, considering where he was drafted 3rd overall by the 49ers, is that he was a tweener. scouts, executives didn't really know if he was better playing edge since he lacked the length that you need to be a good edge rusher, but you couldn't really play him primarily on the interior of your defensive line since he was 6'3", but only 273 pounds, so he was undersized. Now, you could have said that you could have added a few 15, 20 extra pounds of weight on him, but then you might have made him a little bit too big for his frame, and then you lose a little bit of that athleticism. But in 9 seasons, he's had 18 sacks, so he's not a bust. He's been solid. It's just that he wasn't the all-pro level player that a lot of scouts and experts thought that he was going to be coming out of that 2017 class. John Ross is the prime example of why speed is overrated. John Ross was supposed to be Tyreek Hill before Tyreek Hill, but the problem with John Ross is that he didn't have the change direction or the agility that Tyreek Hill had in the open field. And even then, he wasn't really that good at generating a lot of yak. He was more so a Deshaun Jackson kind of deep threat. He was somebody that if he beat you off the line early, you had no shot at being able to catch him. He couldn't run routes. He didn't have good hands. And very early into his career with the Bengals, who took him 9th overall in 2017, he got put in the doghouse by Marvin Lewis. There wasn't really no public explanation for why he was in the doghouse, but you didn't really see any of John Ross at all until like his second, third season in the league. That's when he started having a little bit of production, and you started to come along on John Ross. Like, okay, man, maybe you're not just speed. But after his third season in the league, he really didn't do anything at all. And he now is in the UFL. And he lasted 6 seasons, so you can't necessarily call him a bust. It's not like he was Josh Rosen, only spent a cup of coffee, and then next day he was out that thing. But outside of breaking Chris Johnson's 40-yard dash record, that's the only reason why John Ross got drafted as high as what he did. At Washington, he had some good tape, but he more so was, I'm trying to think of that wide receiver that the Eagles drafted over Justin Jefferson. It was the same class as CeeDee Lamb, Jerry Jeudy. It was Jalen Reagor. John Ross was like Jalen Reagor. The speed is the main reason why you got entrenched and drafted him as high as what you did, but he just wasn't that skilled as a receiver. Now, maybe if he would have went to a more creative offensive coordinator, they could have got more out of him, but the Bengals had a good OC at the time. So John Ross just wasn't that good. Jeff Okudah was supposed to be one of the greatest cornerback prospects that the NFL has ever seen. He was your prototypical blue chip corner. What you were looking for in the perfect corner, Jeff Okudah had all those attributes. Perfect size. He was 6 foot, 205 pounds of rock solid, good tackler, had pretty good footwork and quickness. Unfortunately, when he got selected 3rd overall in the 2020 draft by the Detroit Lions, how good he was in college didn't translate to the pros because he struggled to adapt to the smaller margins on the field. You see, in college, you have wider hashes. So if you're a boundary corner, depending on what side of the field you're at, you may not have to defend as much field as what you do in the NFL, because if you have wide margins in college, then you can use the sidelines as kind of like a secondary defender that can assist you. In the NFL, the margins aren't that wide, so the sideline doesn't help you as much. And that hurt Jeff Okudah because he was really grabby when you beat him off the line. If he wasn't able to either punch you or jam you, he just got into panic mode. And injuries slowed him down. Matt Patricia's scheme wasn't really a good fit for him either. Jeff Okudah will forever go down as one of the biggest disappointments in NFL draft history, because everything that you look for in an elite corner, Jeff Okudah had all those attributes. Jeff Okudah was supposed to be Derek Stingley, and instead he just is what the opposite of Derek Stingley was. Isaiah Simmons was always destined to be overhyped. He was always destined to be a bust because he didn't really develop that much at Clemson since they had this brother playing 4 different positions. And that's what made Isaiah Simmons such a hyped up prospect. At the time, we never saw anybody be able to play as many different positions as what Isaiah Simmons had the ability to do. At Clemson, he was playing corner, slot corner, edge, off-ball linebacker, and safety. So he was a jack of all trades in college, and then he gets to the NFL and becomes a master of none. In over 4 years, Isaiah Simmons has been on 4 different NFL teams and has been able to stick on the roster. We last seen him play for the Carolina Panthers, helping out on special teams, but hasn't really gotten that many opportunities to be a starter ever since his first few seasons with the Arizona Cardinals. And what went wrong for Isaiah Simmons is that, yes, it's good to have somebody that can play multiple positions. That versatility is definitely something that an elite defensive coordinator can use to take their defense to the next level. But when you have somebody that splits so much of their college development between so many different positions, they never really truly master one. And everybody thinks that any player can be successful if they're in the right scheme. That's not necessarily the case. If you don't have that much experience at one position, and then you go into the NFL and you're still trying to figure out what position are you really the best at, you're not going to succeed. The Arizona Cardinals tried him at linebacker. That didn't work out. So before they traded him to the Giants, they moved him to safety. And that didn't really work out because although he was a guy who ran the 4.38 and the 40-yard dash, which is insane for a guy his size at 6'4", 238 pounds, he didn't have that lateral quickness. He didn't have the change of direction. He didn't have that open field agility. So he wasn't really that good in coverage. He didn't really do a good job at diagnosing the run. But one thing I will say is that despite how much of a disappointment Isaiah Simmons' NFL career has been, this dude deserves to be in the Madden Hall of Fame. If we're talking about some of the greatest user players in the history of Madden, Isaiah Simmons is a first ballot Hall of Famer. If you had Isaiah Simmons starting for you at linebacker on an online franchise, online dynasty, you have the MVP of the defense in the league. Because this dude, anytime somebody was lurking in the middle of the field with Isaiah Simmons, yeah, you knew to throw that ball to the other side of the field. Because Isaiah Simmons was a Madden god, which is why it's so disappointing his career played out the way that it did. Because he was so good on Madden. It's just in real life, he just couldn't figure it out. Zach Wilson is why I have PTSD when it comes to evaluating quarterbacks that don't play well within the structure of an offense. Zach Wilson was supposed to be the next Patrick Mahomes when he was drafted 2nd overall by the Jets in the 2021 NFL Draft. But what the Jets got wrong about Zach Wilson is that he only looked as good as what he did during his final season at BYU due to the weirdness of the 2020 season. So they didn't really play that tough of a schedule. And even when they did play tough comp, Zach Wilson didn't look that good. And Zach Wilson made a lot of highlight throws in college that you can only make in college. All the throws that he made in college, he only made probably 2 or 3 of them throughout all the passes that he attempted in the NFL, because all that shit he was doing in college only worked in college. Once he got to the NFL, he had to learn how to operate the quick game. He couldn't get it down. He couldn't understand coverages. He was very inaccurate. Even if you were 5 yards downfield and you were wide open, there was no guarantee that Zach Wilson was going to be able to find you. And going to the New York Jets didn't do Zach Wilson any favors. Let's be honest about it. Robert Saleh, the offensive coordinator that he hired, Mike LaFleur, who is the new head coach of the Arizona Cardinals, he didn't want Zach Wilson. Because Zach Wilson, he knew wasn't going to be a good fit for how complex his scheme was. But Robert Saleh and the Jets, being the Jets, drafted Zach Wilson anyway, even though their offensive coordinator didn't want him. And surprise, surprise, it didn't work out. Now, like everybody, he just needs to go to a better situation. He spent a little bit of time with the Denver Broncos. He was the Dolphins' third-string quarterback last year. He now is the backup quarterback for the Saints behind Tyler Shuck. But the problem with Zach Wilson is just he played a lot of backyard football. He was pretty much a better NFL version of Johnny Manziel. Think about what Johnny Manziel was as a prospect when he was coming out of Texas A&M, but with times 100 the physical attributes, better athlete, stronger arm. That's what Zach Wilson was. And that's why Zach Wilson didn't translate to NFL. He was more Johnny Manziel than he was an NFL quarterback. Now, lastly, we have... What's going on? Najee Harris. Najee Harris is one of the most overhyped running backs in NFL history. When the Steelers took him 24th overall in the 2021 NFL draft, it was the first time the Steelers drafted a player that actually won it. And he was hyped up as this old school running back with more modernization in his game. Najee Harris was like Derrick Henry, but a little bit smaller, but a lot more explosive, also a lot more effective in the passing game. There was a moment during Alabama's national championship run in 2020 when Najee Harris jumped 40 feet in the air over a Notre Dame defender, and he just looked like a man amongst boys. He was one of the most athletic players in all of college football during his time at Alabama. All of a sudden, he gets to the NFL, and the athleticism that he had at Alabama is nowhere to be found. He comes to the Steelers, he's slow, he has no vision, he's running in the blocks, he can't find the holes, and it's very shocking that Najee Harris, despite him currently not being on the team right now, ran for over 1,000 yards in his first 4 seasons. So that tells you everything that you need to know about how overrated having a 1,000-yard rushing season is, because all you need to get 1,000 yards in the season is rush for 50 yards per game, and you'll have that. So Najee Harris, he just wasn't the workhorse back that he was hyped up to be coming out of Alabama. We thought, as Steeler fans, we were getting like a diet version of Jerome Bettis. We thought this was the bus 2.0, and instead it ended up being the slow bus 1.0. And I love Najee Harris as a person. He was always a very likable guy, always gave very honest interviews post-game. I was sad when the Steelers let him go and they chose not to bring him back, but he was just a very big disappointment. I was expecting a lot out of Najee Harris. His rookie season was pretty solid. He had around 1,600 total yards, but outside of that, man, he was just very slow. The only thing that Najee Harris did very well was run over people. He was always in the top 12 or higher in yards after contact, but a lot of that was just due to him not having that good of vision. So by the time he got the carry, he was already running into somebody. But he's so big, he is going to run a few guys over. It is very hard to bring this guy down if you're a defensive back, one-on-one in the open field, because even though he's not that fast, he's not that agile, the dude does move pretty well for his size, but he just wasn't what you look for the first round back. When you draft a running back in the first round, you know when you have a first round caliber running back, because they have that instant acceleration. It's like as soon as they get the football, it only takes them 1-2 steps and they're already at full speed, like Jahmyr Gibbs, B. John Robinson, Saquon Barkley. First round running backs have elite twitchiness. Not only are they super athletic, not only do they run fast, but they're very twitchy to the point when it seems like they don't even have to think. Their body just moves. It's like they're moving with ultra instinct and real life in a sense. And Najee Harris just didn't have that. And I'm not going to act like I knew that Najee Harris was going to be a disappointment. Like, I can admit when I was wrong. Like, I was very happy and very excited when the Steelers drafted Najee Harris. It was the first time the Steelers drafted a player in the first round that I wanted. So I was very disappointed that Najee Harris ended up not being the player that he looked like at Alabama. But these are the 10 most overhyped NFL draft prospects from the 2010s. If there's anybody that you feel should have been on this list, let me know down in the comment section. I only made 10, only had room for 10 players, but I'm pretty sure there's a lot of other prospects that you guys remember from over the past 16 drafts that had a massive amount of hype and didn't live up to it. But this was one of my favorite segments to do, one of my favorite segments to make, even though it kind of took a lot longer to come on here and go live since it was pretty lengthy doing the research for this. You know, I enjoyed coming up with this segment. And I enjoyed this episode being on here of JT Sports Live with all of you guys. Shout out to everybody that tuned in. Shout out to Kate Brinkley with the $5 donation. She says, I was 100% sold on Clowney for at least a few years. Definitely a big time bust. Greatly appreciate you keeping the live streams going, man. Hey, I appreciate you, Kate, for always supporting the channel. Shout out to my guy, M Sparks 187. We appreciate you chipping in with the $5 donation. He says, keep up the great work, JT. Pittsburgh Steelers for life. Pittsburgh Steelers for life, my guy. Shout out to my guy, Kazir Gordon. Shout out to everybody that's tapped into the chat, man. I will see you guys either tomorrow or Thursday with another episode